Welcome back to Actors Turn Directors interview with Mel Gibson, part three. We're going to pick up where we left off in part two, which is discussing rehearsals with the actors. Question: how much rehearsal time did you have on Braveheart, Mel? Mel. Braveheart went like lightning. We started pre production in March and we were shooting by June. That in itself is an incredible feat considering the size of the picture and the elements we needed to gather. Everyone worked very hard. We didn't have rehearsals because there were so many cast members, 68 speaking parts, and these people were scattered all over Europe. We literally couldn't get them there at the same time. When I met all these thousands of actors and actresses during the casting period, we would sit down and talk about the script and the part for about 15 or 20 minutes. And in a way, that's a kind of a rehearsal. It was very, very sketchy. We didn't actually have a formal rehearsal time. Mel, do you think not having rehearsal hurts an actor's performance in any way? Obviously, it would have made things a bit easier for them if they had been given an opportunity to rehearse. But I don't think anyone was hurt by lack of it. I mean, you could see it on the screen. The cast did a magnificent job. Question: how was your first day on the set as a first time director on Man Without a Face? Did you feel the need to do something spectacular to prove yourself and the cast and the crew that you know what you were doing? Mel: I was very nervous, but at the same time exhilarated. I didn't sleep much the night before. I kept thinking about how I would have to step out there with everyone looking at me, expecting me to provide leadership. It's different from being an actor, where you're just a piece of the entire puzzle. As a director, the responsibility for the entire vision, for running the entire operation, rests completely on your shoulders. That can be very intimidating, and I'm not easily intimidated. By my second film, Braveheart, they looked at me like I knew what I was doing, which was nice. Question: what kind of a scene did you shoot on the first day of Man Without a Face? Did you select something that you knew you could handle easily? Mel: not necessarily. It was the scene in the Graveheart with the girl singing a song and the kid who comes along on his bike watches her by the fence. I thought that was fairly ambitious for the first day of shooting. Question: how much did Nick Stahl need to, how much time or help actually, Nick Stahl needed to create and maintain his high level of performance? I made him feel real comfortable. Once you give Nick the ball to run with, he's courageous enough to grab hold of it with both hands and give it his best. As the film progressed day by day, I saw him gain more and more confidence. We improvised things that right off at the bat were so wonderful that I just marveled at this kid. As he progressed, he needed less and less messing with. He started to do the right thing naturally. So I figured, why mess with it? He's a very talented kid. Question: do you like rehearsing emotional scenes both as an actor and as a director? Mel: I don't actually. I do rehearse them. I mark them, we block them through, but you don't give it anything until you start rolling, emotionally anyway. Usually the first couple of takes go astray like stray bullets, and then you settle into something, usually around take three or four. I don't do a lot of takes. So it's spontaneous? Mel: yeah, I think so. Often in rehearsal, if you haven't learned your lines, you'll start off, get a response that will elicit another response, which may not be the one that is scripted. but it may be better response because it's the next logical thought. I'm not saying you shouldn't learn your lines, and some writers may resent me, but sometimes the actor has to make the lines live, make them real, and for the most part, they embrace what's there. Question: do you find that child actors have to be directed differently than adults? Answer: I was fortunate in that both my young actors were very cerebral and instinctive and had the maturity to listen and respond to one another. Listening and responding, not just anticipating your cues from the other actors, is the key to good acting. The more loving and giving you are to your counterpart actor, the more truthful your performance will be. That, to me, is the essence of it all. And that also applies to the director, who must have the capacity to recognize when actors are listening and responding to each other. Question: how does a director cultivate that kind of ability? Instinct is something you're born with, and experience sharpens it, which is why I think, in terms of working with actors and pulling a better performance out of them, a director who has acting experience, or at least an in depth understanding of the process an actor goes through, has an edge in seeing subtleties that an untrained eye or ear may not pick up. So even if a director is not an actor, he should immerse himself or herself in the mechanics and the language of acting. It's all a matter of preparation, doing your homework before you ever set foot on the set. And it all begins with observation and communication. Question: how did you cast James Robinson, who played young Wallace in Braveheart? Mel: it was the biggest piece of luck. He was Scottish. He could do an accent. He used a very intellectual approach to things that you could read in his face. He was a minimalist, which was fantastic. All he had to do was talk to the boy and he'd go for it. It was all thought processes. He was very poetic and he had these magnificent, very expressive eyes. He was a real find. Question: how did you get him to cry during the funeral scene? Well, I helped him a bit, laughter. I didn't want the kid to cry until the girl hands him the flower and then he permits himself to show his grief. It was very technical. I asked him not to do anything except look at her, and I just sprayed some menthol crystal in his eyes. It saved a lot of time. Question: when you do emotional scenes, do you shoot your close ups first? Response: doing a wide master gives an actor the opportunity to warm up and to get hold of the emotional key of the scene. Though sometimes, when I need to save time, I go into the close ups immediately and maybe don't even shoot a master. But to do that, you've got to really have thought it out so you don't get stuck in the editing room. Which brings into mind cutaways. They're crucial. If you're doing a long scene and it drags out, you have something to cut away to. So it's absolutely essential. Doing close-ups is always important. In Braveheart, I shot my close-ups but didn't linger on them. It was a little puzzle for me to get inside people and stay true to the scope of the film at the same time. I had to maintain a certain balance. You can create that balance during the shooting, but sometimes you need to find that balance in the editing room. So you had better cover yourself. I always say that. Cover yourself. That's crucial. Question: in A Man Without a Face, how did you pull off the back to back scenes that grew in emotional intensity when Chuck finds his sister in bed with her boyfriend, and when he cries in McLeod's arms, and the explosive scene with his mom? Answer: well, you start with some kind of a blueprint in your head, and you build from that. You get to the set, you watch the camera blocking, you start to see possibilities of how you're going to shoot it. And you talk to the actors, making sure they understand what the purpose of the scene is, where the emotions lie. You do a take or two and you start to shape it, develop a rhythm. You turn it up or you slow it down a bit, and you get to the point where something happens that starts sparks inside the actors. And then something wonderful happens, something you didn't even anticipate, a change in delivery, a change in attitude, even a line change. Question: I found the end scene where the adult Chuck looks at McLeod at his military academy graduation very moving. Was that difficult to direct since this kid was a day player coming in for just one scene in which he had to have emotional intensity? Answer: it wasn't difficult. Somebody spotted this kid in an elevator, believe it or not, in Cincinnati. He had an extraordinary face that expressed this innocence. He wasn't an actor, even. He was just a guy. I was very by the numbers with him about the exact kind of beat I wanted to see. I told him to be very still and not even move his eyes. Just stare for 5 seconds. I explained the whole backstory to him, and he was quite relaxed about it, which was extraordinary. How many rewrites did you do on the Braveheart script? Well, we never did what you might call a formal rewrite because Randy Wallace put his heart and soul into the script. I read it and it got inside of me. During pre production, Randy came over to London and we just tweaked the scenes, moving them around. It was just a process of adapting it here and there, and then being spontaneous when we had to be on the set. Randy was the only one and writer. Some of the best scenes in the film were in the first draft, believe it or not. Occasionally, I'd fiddle a bit with this or that. A director has to make it work for his own sensibility. But some writers are too close to their scripts. They get upset when you make changes. Luckily, Randy was cool. I understood his vision. It affected me on a very fundamental, visceral level, and he knew it. I only tried to enhance the power of what was already there, and it seemed to have worked very well. This brings us to the end of the Mel Gibson interview part 3. Part 4 will be coming up soon. In the meantime, I am hoping that you find this terrific information useful to you, especially if you are an aspiring actor and or director. And if you like the content, please help me out by liking, sharing, and subscribing, which would be very, very helpful to me. Thank you again for tuning in. And I want to thank Mel Gibson. He was terrific with me. God bless him. And I wish him the greatest success. Should have won an Oscar with Hacksaw Ridge, but he didn't, unfortunately. Perhaps the next one. I saw Mel at a screening of the film, and I reminded him backstage that I still remembered his generosity. God bless him. I hope one day I'll have the privilege of working with him.